Okay, hello everyone. Hope you're keeping well and your families are well. This is a video tutorial to help you with your oral. So today we're going to go through your Year 11 Music 1 oral booklet, and we're going to start from page 3. So please have your booklet with you. I'm going to be reading pages from the booklet and demonstrating what they sound like on instruments today. So we're going to start, with page 4 of the oral booklet, which starts with the concept of pitch. So pitch, of course, is the highness or lowness of sound. Okay, and within that there are 4 concepts, and those concepts are melody. I'll give you an example of a melody. Harmony. So we can add harmony to any melody. Tonality, and there are 2 types of tonality, which are major and minor. So the piece you just heard, Mary Had a Little Lamb, is in a major key or a major tonality, and I'll now perform it for you in a minor tonality. And then we also have register and range. So register refers to the low, middle, and high parts of any instrument. So instruments will sound different. The tone color will sound different depending on what register they're playing in. So for example, a piano will sound muddy down the bottom, and it'll also sound thin up the top and lighter up the top. Okay, and that's pretty much the same for most instruments. They sound muddy down the bottom and thinner on the top. Okay, range. If you look through your oral booklet, it says range is the range of notes of a melody, bass line or accompaniment line, which means support line. So basically the 2 words you use to describe range are narrow or wide. So for example, Mary Had a Little Lamb has a narrow use of notes because it only uses 5 notes. So that's the bottom note of the melody, and that's the top note. So we say that the range of notes for Mary Had a Little Lamb is a fifth, because the bottom note is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes away from the top note. Okay, so that's anything less than 5 notes is quite a narrow range of notes. So you're looking at a pretty simple melody usually that only uses 5 notes. However, there are some songs which have a wide range of notes, and I'm going to play a couple for you now. The first one in your booklet says Baby Elephant Walk, which goes like this. Whoops. I'll play it again. So you can see here in the first line of the song, we've gone over an octave in the first 5 notes. Okay, I've stuffed up the melody there, but you got the idea, okay? So we would say the range of this song is an octave. An octave is 8 notes. That's 8 notes, so we're going 9, 10 notes is the range of that melody, and that song is called Baby Elephant Walk. Okay. The other example in your booklet is called Zarathustra, which is a piece that goes like this. It's a famous orchestral piece, and that also has a wide range of a tenth, because the bottom note is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 notes away from the top. Okay, so we would consider that a wide range of notes. Okay, moving on to register. So it says in your booklet, register. Each instrument, we've covered this, has a high, mid, and low register. It is part of the range of the instrument. For example, a soprano singer in its low register a soprano is a high female singer, is still higher in pitch than a bass voice in their high register. And a bass voice is a low male voice, so someone who would sing Old Man River, that old man river. That's, you're looking at a male bass voice there. Harmony. Let's read harmony. Harmony refers to the use of chords in music. Chords are the simultaneous, which means sounding at the same time. So chords are simultaneous sounding of two or more notes at once. So we've got, I'm going to play two notes at once. So there we have chords, because there's two notes sounding at the same time. Otherwise, we call it a melody if it's only one note. Okay, so as soon as you have two or more, you've got a melody. A chord, which is harmony. I'll keep reading. For example, the piano and guitar are the two most common chordal instruments. Chords are usually major. This is a major chord. Or minor. So as you can see, on a major chord, it's a bright sound, and then to convert that to a minor, you drop the middle note down a semitone. So a semitone means you go down one note on the keyboard. So I'm going to take it to the black note, and this is C minor, which is dark. Okay, so they're the two most common types of chords. The third chord there is called diminished chord, and that's very dark and sinister sound. So it's not major or minor, it's called diminished, and it sounds like this. So you can see it's a darker sound than a minor chord, and it's used a lot in horror movies. Okay, so even though you only need two notes to make a chord, most of the time in music we actually have three notes in a chord. Okay. However, we can also use four notes in a chord, or we can actually even put five notes in a chord for more color. I'll do that again. So three notes is called a triad. It's used a lot in pop music. But we can also add four notes to a chord for more color. And we can even add five notes if you want, and that will give it a more jazzy sound and more harmonic color. So that's what we call that a 9 chord, and there are 5 notes in a 9 chord. I'll demonstrate. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So there's five different notes there. We call them 9 chords. Okay. So, moving on. Bass line. I'll read bass line. The role of the bass line is to outline the harmony chords of a piece. For example, if a piece uses the chords C, A minor, E minor, and G, the bass instrument will play the notes C, A minor, E, G. The bass line is not always played by a double bass or a bass guitar. Any low-pitched instrument such as a tuba, trombone, or bassoon can take this role. And I'm going to do this role today on the piano. So I might just move the video so you can see the bass. Okay. So that's a bass line. So that's a pretty traditional bass line there. So That was syncopated. I could also, syncopated means that I've kind of jazzed it up or funkied it up. I could also play it straight. So do, do, okay, so that would be called a straight bass line, so without any funky rhythms. The other really common bass line is called a 1/5 bass. So that's when the bass just uses the first note of a chord and then the fifth note, which is 5 notes above. So it sounds a bit like this. Da 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 da. 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 Okay, so that pa sort of sound, they use it a lot in folk music, like so you can see the bass line gives that ba ba, that sort of pa music that they use in Eastern European folk music. But you see it all the time, this 1/5 bass line. Okay, that's really important because it's really common. All right, let's go back to your aural booklet. So we're still on page 4 and we're up to melodic contour. So contour means shape of a melodic line. So in a pitch question, you could describe, and it comes under pitch for the concepts of music, you could describe the contour of each part. So meaning describe the shape of each part. So whether it's a melody, a bass line, or an accompaniment part. The contour is the shape of a musical line. And there are 2 examples I've written in the booklet. The first one is conjunct. Now conjunct is just a musical term we use to describe a smooth or stepwise motion. So I'll play you the one in the booklet as an example. This is smooth and stepwise. So that means all the notes will be right next to each other. Okay? So there's no jumps like this. So no big jumps. So this is the example conjunct from your booklet. Okay. So as you can see there, they were pretty much all step-by-step movements. Okay, so we call that a smooth melodic contour or conjunct. Disjunct means unsmooth, or we say jagged. Okay, this is the disjunct 1, 3, 4. I'll do that again. So as you can see there, there's big jumps in all the melodic notes there. Okay. So as soon as you've got lots of jumps without step movement, the best term you can use for your oral exam is disjunct. That will move you into the higher brackets. But you can also say it's jagged or contains a lot of leaps, we call them. Okay, that's a leap, that's a leap, that's a leap as well. Okay, now you'll find in most music, however, melodies are made up of a mixture of conjunct and disjunct. So that's a mixture of steps and leaps. So I'll play that little melody for you, which is called mixed, down the last melody. So as you can see there, it starts off with a step, and then a small jump, and then a step, and then a big jump. And that's pretty common with music. Most music will be a mixture of steps and leaps, and you need to describe that mixture in the best way that you can. So you might describe this melody as starting with steps and then ending with a large ascending leap. So pretty much small steps to begin with, and then it finishes with a large ascending leap. So that would be a good description of that melody there. Okay, that's page 4. Let's turn over to page 5 now. Texture. Texture is the number of layers in a piece of music and the relationship between these layers. When instruments or layers are added to a piece, the texture increases. That's the word missing there. Okay, so the more layers of a piece that are being added, the increase in the texture, or the thicker the texture becomes. When instruments or layers are taken away from a piece, the texture decreases or becomes thinner. Each layer also has a specific role within the piece. So roles are really important. Staggered entry is when different musical layers enter at different times in the piece. So for example, a piece might start with bass and drums, and then a guitar might come in, a keyboard, and then a vocalist. So they're all coming in at different times, and that's what staggered means. It means that things aren't happening at the same time. It's meaning that they're happening at different times. So that will build the texture there. Roles of instruments. It says, question 2, it says, name the 5 types of roles instruments can play. So we've got melody, we've got accompaniment role, we've got decorative role, which is probably not as important as the other 4 roles, rhythmic role, and bass line. So I'll repeat that. Melodic role, accompaniment, which is the support part, decorative, which is a kind of a smaller a decorative is something that's not essential but just adds and makes it sound pretty. Then you've got a rhythmic role, which is usually done by percussion instruments, and a bass line role. Okay. So question 3, we've got texture labels. Okay, so we have stage 6 terms that we use to describe texture. Okay, the first one is monophonic. So a monophonic meaning one, mono meaning one, is just a melody by itself with no accompaniment at all. Okay, so that would be monophonic. Homophonic is when there's a clear supporting part. So this is homophonic. Okay. So as you can see, I was using chords to accompaniment, and then I also did a couple of little melodies, or what we call these melodic fills. And they just fill in the gaps that the right-hand melody was leaving, okay, and that's called melodic fills. So that's homophonic, means you've got a clear melody and then you've got a support part. Now polyphonic, I'll have a go at polyphonic, but it's hard to do on the piano. Poly means more than one. So polyphonic is when you have 2 or more independent melodies at one time. So I'll try and demonstrate. Okay, so that was a pretty poor example, apologies, but you can see there that I was actually doing 2 melodies at once, and they were going in different directions and doing their own thing. They were independent. So that means polyphonic, okay? The bottom part here was not supporting the melody. It was actually its own melody in its own right, and that's what makes polyphonic. All right, question 4. So you need to match the terms with the definition. So we've got melodic role is the main feature of a piece that the listener is focused on. Accompaniment role is supports the melody with example block chords. This is a block chord, or this is a broken chord, or counter melodies. So counter melodies are like the demonstration I did in polyphonic. That's when you have 2 or more melodies at once. Decorative role, the answer there is makes the music sound more appealing or pretty, yet it is unessential. So that means you can take it out of the piece and the piece will still work fine. And finally, we've got rhythmic role. That's usually played by percussion. So rhythmic is anything like this. Okay. We've also got bass line. Okay, and we've covered bass line not long a few minutes ago. So a low pitched layer that outlines the harmony of a piece. So the key there is low pitch. Okay. All right, so that's page 5 done. Let's turn over to page 6. Tone color. I'll just read the opening paragraph. Tone color is the quality of the sound that you are hearing. For example, each singer has a unique tone color as everyone's voice has a unique tone color. So that means if I sang a song in the key of C, and then another singer came along and sang the same melody in the key of C, the songs would still sound different because our voices have unique tone colors. The example I've got is when a violin plays a middle C note, it sounds different to a cello playing a middle C as they have different tone colors. So I've listed some orchestral instruments there. And then in the middle of that page, there are 4 YouTube tracks. So I strongly suggest that you listen to those regularly. And hopefully after some listening, you'll be able to identify different instruments. So for example, in the booklet it says, know the difference between a violin and a cello. So you'll need to do a bit of intense listening until you start hearing that. Of course, a cello will sound a bit deeper, slightly lower in pitch usually, and a bit of a fuller sound, not as thin as a violin, because a cello is much bigger than a violin. Okay, it's about 5 times the size of a violin. So I strongly suggest that you go through page 6 regularly. Don't just do it in one day. Just chip away at it, and hopefully by the time you get to the end of year 12, you'll be able to identify different instruments accurately. And that's really important because in your oral exam, you're likely to get at least 1 or 2 orchestral examples. So you will need to know the orchestral instruments for your HSC oral exam. Okay. Let's turn to page 7. Classifying orchestral instruments into sections. I'll just read the opening paragraph. When all instruments of an orchestra are played at once, it is useful to refer to sections within each family. So by family I mean strings, woodwind, brass, and percussion. They're the 4 families. So for example, the lower stringed section are playing accompaniment chords in section 1. So lower strings refers to cellos and double bass, whereas upper strings refer to violins and violas. Okay, so when we say upper, we mean they play in the upper range of notes in pitch. So that would be the top half of the piano. So they're your violins and violas, and the cello and basses would play down here. Okay. Now, if we keep going, with the example there in the booklet says upper woodwinds. So upper woodwinds are flutes and piccolos. Lower woodwinds are bassoons. Lower brass are tubas and trombones. Upper strings are violins and violas. And lower strings are cellos and double basses. Okay. We're going to skip the describing tone color because I think we'll be better to cover that in class. Okay. So we're now up to page 8, and what I'll do is I'll cover page 8 on the drum kit. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the drum kit. Okay. Now drum kit is not actually used in the orchestra, but sometimes they do use the drum kit in the orchestra. Alright, sorry it's a little bit dark. Okay. So I'll do my best to go through this sheet. Okay, so drum kit is used a lot in pop and jazz because it was only invented in the 1900s. So most classical music didn't have a drum kit when it was written. But parts of the drum kit are featured in classical music, like the bass drum and the snare drum and the cymbals. Okay, but you won't find them in a kit. So you'll find 3 different musicians playing those drums. Okay, so it says number 1, drum kit, page 8. List all 4 symbols of the drum kit and listen to these sounds on YouTube. So the first one I'm going to play for you is the crash cymbal. All right, and they use that for emphasis in music. The second one is the ride. I'll play that again. So the ride rings out a bit longer than the crash. And the third one is the hi-hat. Okay, so the hi-hat makes a tss sound. Now, there's only 3 cymbals on the drum kit, so I made a mistake there in the booklet. So crash, ride, and hi-hat. Alright, question 2. List all 3 drums on the drum kit. So we've got bass drum, which is also called the kick drum. I'm going to play that with my foot, which is down there. And we've got snare. So it has a little rattle on it, the snare. And it's used a lot in marching bands. But also used in heaps of popular music. And we've got toms. And we've got a floor tom. Okay, so they're all the drums. Question 3, which cymbal makes a tss sound? That's the hi-hat. Question 4, which cymbal is used for accents? So accents are notes that are played with force and emphasizing a climax. That is the crash cymbal. And finally, the drum kit is usually played with drumsticks. However, it can also be played with, and there's 2 other things you can play a drum with. So we've got padded mallets that just have a bit of cushion. So it makes it sound a little bit softer. And the other thing you can play the drums with is called brushes. And these are brushes over here. Okay, you can see they're made of metal wire, so they don't make the same sound as drums. It's a lot lighter. I'll just give you a beat. So you can see that it's a lot lighter if you're looking for a gentle style of piece. Okay. If you turn over the page, it goes on with the snare drum. So it says, I'm not going to read that paragraph, but that paragraph's important. But a snare roll, I can't do a snare roll because I'm not a drummer, but I can give you a rim shot. Rim shots are used a lot in popular music. So that's when you hit the edge of the drum and not the skin in the middle, which gives a rattle. So if you hit the rim, that'll give you a bit of a warmer sound than the skin of the snare. And a snare roll is your traditional, I'll give it a go, but it won't sound very good, is your traditional drum roll. Okay, that's your snare roll. Okay. Alright, so that gets us up to page 9, and I'm going to stop there. Hopefully that was a help, and good luck preparing for your oral exams.